to exhibit number H, not so much for the specifics of the questionnaire that I believe you submitted. I believe it was to CSAC, but I think it references a very important concept that it's important to bring forward now and not wait till next year. Question number 8 has the county impacts with investments and borrowing, and the comment that you make is, due to the stock market fall, we anticipate an unfunded liability in the retirement system, which will create an additional county contribution for next year. To that point, if you could sort of just go over very briefly our funding obligations for the unfunded liabilities, the 90% ratio that we are, I believe, required to maintain, and have any calculations been done when you reference this additional contribution for next year? What are we talking about? I mean, have you done any working with numbers on that? And the second part of that is, I believe the county took steps just in this last budget cycle to move forward on the additional 10% funding, which created a greater contribution for the county in employees, the employer's contribution of wages. So that was a direct impact to the general fund, which I believe the board made the commitment. We want to continue that to pay off that additional 10%, I believe, in a 10-year time frame. So obviously, if we're not meeting our 90% obligation, it's pretty difficult to figure out how we're going forward to escalate and move forward on the additional 10%. But if you could comment on what calculations have been done and where are we going with this additional contribution, because this could be a very, very significant item for our next fiscal year.
Okay. As of right now, there hasn't been any calculations as to what the unfunded liability would be for 9/10. We anticipate that there will be an unfunded liability. However, to remind the board on one point, that due to the 5-year smoothing method, some of this unfunded liability that we assume because of the stock market crash may be made up with that 5-year smoothing for the county contributions. However, you're correct, Supervisor Smith, when you talk about the board's commitment to the 10% over the next 1% increase over the next 10 years. As I recall, this fiscal year, we had an additional $400,000 impact for that 1%, or in addition to the county contribution. So we're looking at over and above that anticipated $400,000 added to the current unfunded liability. So it's hard to say at this point, and it's an unknown what that unfunded liability is. But back in 2005, I can say that when we had a stock market crash, we had a significant unfunded liability of $4.2 million to make up that we amortized over 3 years. Over several years, but we did an amortization schedule to pay that off over 3 years, and it's done. So that's paid off, and we, unfortunately, because of the stock market crash, here we are again. So we will be looking at that very closely and trying to determine what our county contribution is going into this 9/10 fiscal year.
So, because I think as soon as we can get any preliminary information on that, that's going to be useful.
Yes.
I mean, I think you're correct in that 5-year smoothing approach helps us defer, if you will, or delay, or actually the concept of smoothing it helps with the impacts in terms of one, because this year would be an incredible hit if we had to take the whole thing in 1 year. So, but I think it's very clear from the predictions I've read that we are going to drop below the 90%. So there is going to be some employer increase. There's going to have to be. And so I just am thinking, that on top of the $400,000 you referenced that we were trying to do the prudent thing and get the 100% fully funded retirement system that we believe needs to be in place as one of our primary responsibilities, this is going to really impact that if we're talking about another 2, 3, 4, 500,000 in just meeting our 90% obligation.
Correct.
So I think the sooner we get that information, I think we ought to schedule a budgetary discussion in early '09 on that, so the board is fully informed. We'll have new board members. We need to talk about very significant dollars and a very, very significant commitment to something that's very, very high on our priority list. I mean, in terms of legal requirements and so forth. So I think that we need to get as much information on that upfront to the public and to the decision makers as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Colfax, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Picking up on what Supervisor Pinchas referred to with regard to the Exhibit G, travel in and out of the county year-to-date report, I'd just like to observe here that if we are going to start paying attention to overages, if we get on that list, the first page following the cover page, we see that there are different units that have gone over, but again, with one exception in the entire list, only one unit has gone over and by a significant amount, and that's the grand jury, which enjoys privileges with regard to reimbursement for meals and times and when they may be permitted to stay overnight to do their very, very important work. And I was under the impression here that the CEO was going to monitor this very carefully. They are now 118% over. And again, we're talking about not real money, but we're talking about sizable amount of money, and it stands out, I think, rather dramatically in this situation. I wonder what kind of attention CEO's office has given to this, and the extent to which there's been a response from the grand jury, which seems to be very concerned about the responses of other units of county government when it comes to the matter of the abuse of, or the alleged abuse of travel opportunities and so forth. So my question would go to the CEO. What has been done about this? Because at this particular point, they will be roughly $15,000 over budget. And when we're talking about saving $15,000 here and $20,000 there, this may be a trivial amount. On the other hand, it's symptomatic, I believe, of an abuse of the system. And the board has an obligation to take note of this and deal with it. So what has been the response, and what does the assessor, how are these matters being attended to in a way that would impose on them the same requirements that are imposed on others in county government?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Both the Executive Office and County Council have had several meetings with the grand jury expressing similar concerns that